Hi, I'm Lacey Filipich from Money School, and I'm here today to tell you about an analogy for your personal financial life. It's not the first time you might have heard of this analogy. I'm told it's been used before, but I just wanted to talk about it because I think it's such a useful one. I've heard people talk about investing as, planting a seed and trees and growing, and that's very good. It's a great analogy, but I actually really like this one a lot better because it introduces this aspect of chance. And the analogy I'm talking about is snakes and ladders. Now, do you remember snakes and ladders when you were a kid? A grid of like 100 squares, and you'd roll the dice and move forward. And if you hit a ladder, you got to jump forward a bit. And if you hit a snake, you had to slide back down. And so it was a bit a case of, you might move forward and back. And certainly you might get to the top eventually, but you might nearly get to the top and, drop onto a snake and have to redo it. My experience with personal finance is that is what it's like in life. So I've got an analogy in my head, which is, what if you started on the snakes and ladders board at zero with nothing, and the only way you could move forward was by saving, because that's how it happens in personal finance. And if you spend, you go backwards. And it is possible to go backwards from zero, and that's called debt. Credit cards, mortgages, personal loans and the like. And you can actually be in that area and never get forward. And some people do spend their entire life that way. And the problem with that is there's more snakes down there. And it's much harder to get onto a ladder and get out. Now, so that's my analogy for how the game might be played. So what would the snakes be? In my head, I would call snakes, the financial obstacles of your life. Things like you get sick and you can't work, or you go through divorce, because we all know that when you break one hole in half, you don't get half each, the lawyer gets a third. Or at least during the sale, everything sort of becomes worth less. So you end up with a lot less money if you go through a divorce. It's just how it is. You might lose your job, you might get made redundant, you might inherit an STD, a sexually transmitted debt. I love that phrase. But your partner might end up in debt and you end up in debt because of it. You might pick a really bad investment, like a property that doesn't work out or a share that tanks, or you might take out a margin loan and lose everything that you've got and you'll end up in debt. Those are all examples of snakes. Things that you might, think you're doing okay, but you hit that and you didn't have a plan in place, and oh no, you got to go right back to the beginning. And so often I talk to people that have had that, and the snake they've gotten to, they're nearly where they want to be. The snake has taken them right the way back to zero, if not into debt. Now, the good news about snakes is that in this context, you can do something about most of them. So in some of them you can reduce how long they are, others you can get rid of them entirely. Things like having prenuptial agreements, things like having insurance, having a savings buffer, so having enough savings in place so that you don't go into debt, so that if the snake would take you down into debt normally, no, you're able to stay out of it. There are strategies that you can employ to reduce the impact of those snakes. Then of course there's the ladders, the things that help you get ahead quicker. Now there's not as many different types of them, but they still come along probably as often as snakes do. For example, you might buy a good property or buy a share, and that helps you get your growth quicker. You compound interest. So instead of just going at the speed of saving, you get to go a little bit quicker through that board. So they come along. There might be things like windfalls, maybe you win the lottery or you get an inheritance as well. They're not something that you rely on, I hope, but they might also contribute to your personal finance. So in that way, we move through the board, only moving forward as we save, occasionally hitting these obstacles and doing our best that we can to reduce the impact of those obstacles. And when we find a ladder, we jump on it and we climb as quick to the top. So I hope that helps you give a bit of a picture about how personal finance can work. I'm going to be working on this analogy a lot further, and I'll be developing into a high school and university student curriculum, kind of a student version of my Achieving Financial Independence course, which I hope will really help students get the skills they need before they can get into terrible things like credit card debt. So if you enjoyed that particular analogy and you like what we're doing, please follow along on our page, subscribe to our blog. We will be posting some more information about the snakes and the ladders of the world as we go through, and of course we're always publishing educational materials and adding to our courses. So thanks for dropping by. I hope you enjoyed it. Love to hear your comments and your thoughts on any other snakes and ladders that I've missed, and please interact with us and tell us what you think and leave some comments. All right, take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.